Cool. So with scheduling efficiency, we really want to kind of, again, get a baseline for how we're functioning and then make adjustments from there if we can to, of course, help to increase your revenue or whatever your goals are. So what we want to first start out with is actually within our Pulse module, we want to get a sense for who actually is our sales staff. And that can be found under our sales module within Retailer Pulse and just this sales staff module. So the only thing I want to point out here, I don't want to focus too much on it because this is a premium session, but if you are curious as to who your sales staff is that's being recorded in the system, you can go down to this employee list. And we probably want to look at this by store. So if you have multiple stores, you can go ahead and adjust that filter. But this employee list is going to give you an idea of who is marked as an employee or not. So you can make adjustments here if needed. And that can be done with this is bud tender yes, no column. So you can see the employee name over here on the left. And then if it's marked as yes, then they're going to be recorded as a bud tender, and that information is going to be flowed through to our employee management module. And then really dive deep into kind of all of the information about those staff. And then if there is, for example, like a floor manager or someone who's not necessarily making those transactions, or like the owner of the store, whatever, anyone that's not necessarily involved in direct transactions, they can be marked as no. So they might come into the system marked as yes if for some reason they did do one sale at one point long time ago. You can go ahead, click into this and update bud tender status. So that's just, and then you can of course just click this drop down and say yes, and then click submit. So that's going to adjust their bud tender status within Headset. So that's kind of first thing. Sorry, was there a question?
No. Keep going.
Cool. Hey AJ, welcome.
Sorry, I'm late.
No worries. All right, cool. So now that we have a good handle on who exactly is our employee list, we can jump over to, we're going to jump into demand planning just for a minute. So we can get an understanding of really that, that transaction throughout the week or month or whatever you want to do. This is in demand planning under hourly and day of week. So this will help you understand, like, what are your peak hours? When is a certain percentage of your revenue? When is that happening? When are your most transactions happening? They have a lot of heat maps on this dashboard, similar to a couple of other dashboards within the Retailer Pulse, but this heat map can be kind of adjusted in terms of a date range. So we don't have to look at just the last week or the last day. Like I think our daily email summary or something similar like that sends that heat map out. We can actually adjust this date range to kind of look at it over a longer period of time. So with this hourly and day of week, again, we want to look at it by store. So we can kind of narrow in on each store when it should be staffed. We have our date range here. I'm just going to look at the last 3 complete months for all of our dashboards that we're going to go over today, but you can adjust that to whatever makes sense for you. And then measure selection. So we can either look at it by total revenue, which I think makes the most sense for hourly and day of week, but you could also look at it by unit or profits. So if you want to see, what does this mean in terms of how many units are sold per hour of day, you can do it that way too. And then just category, of course, you can narrow in on whatever category you're focusing on for that day, or you could do the is not null trick, which will bring in every category, or you could just filter out perhaps like paraphernalia if you don't want to look at non-cannabis related items. But I'm just looking at all categories in my store right now. Cool. So we have a couple of heat maps going on. There's this first one is going to be for all categories at the store, regardless of what you selected up here. So total store sales by units, by hour, and weekday. So you can look at this and you can tell by the indication of the color. So the lighter the rectangle is going to be the the larger transaction amounts at that store, or the more happening times, I guess, at your store, I'll say. And then the darker the rectangle is going to be, the less, so not your peak hours, for example. And it's pretty common to see, you know, Sunday, or I should say Mondays and Tuesdays not being super active, whereas the weekends and kind of midway through the week are a little bit more exciting to look at. So if you hover over every rectangle, and this is the same for every heat map that we have, you can see some data points within it. So let's hover over this really bright rectangle here. Percent of total sales in units. This is the percentage of total sales throughout this entire day. Or I should say, I think it's throughout the entire week. And then sold hour of the day is just the hour of the day. So 4 p.m. would be 16. And then sold hour of the week. So which day are you looking at? So those are the data points that appear within this. And then down here is going to actually be what your filtered selection is going to be. So this is excluding, this would be your category filter, brand filter, what have you. Same concept, so just hover over it and see what that looks like for each hour of the day. Not going to look at index of hourly sales too much, but then we have some line graphs down here at the bottom. So it's clear to see, you know, when are your total store units selling the most. So again, hour 14, which we could tell by this heat map up here, is going to be your percent of sales, your largest percent of sales, I should say. And then at the very bottom, we just have percent of sales compared to total store. So it's comparing on the weekday. So again, Monday and Tuesday are our lowest transaction days. And then it looks like Saturday is our highest transaction day. Pretty straightforward with this hourly and day of week, but do you have any questions on this?
Nope.
Great. Similar to that is our hourly analysis. So this just gives you a better idea and a deeper dive into your hourly sales. And then you can look at it by a couple of different unit points. So again, I'm setting up my filters the same exact way, but we can look at this broken down by revenue percentage, basket count percentage, as well as average basket size percentage. So you can hover over this and see when is the hour, when's the highest percentage of revenue selling at my store, which hour is that? And then it can break down by, I'm looking at the last 3 complete months. So each line is going to represent a different month here. And you can break it down again with the date granularity if you want to look at it by month or by week, but that would add a lot of squiggly lines here. So yeah, again, pretty straightforward. But this information can all tie into what we're going to be talking about in a minute, which is staffing your store. So staffing store has a lot of this hourly analysis, but this gives you kind of, again, like a baseline and a benchmark to see when do we really have to be staffed heavily to meet our demand. When are the slower times? When are the slower days that maybe we could or have less people on the floor? It's all about kind of finding that balance. So combining these data points with what I'm about to show you. So that's why I wanted to give you an idea of what that demand planning looks like, just so you could kind of see on a visual basis, like what the transactions look like. I didn't want to overwhelm with too much information. That would be like an hour. A deep dive into staffing store at the moment. I got a notification that my internet is unstable. Can everyone still hear me okay?
I can hear you now. You're a little choppy for a second, but I can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Hey, Amelia,
If,
one thing that might help is if you remove your camera, that can help when your internet is unstable. Just as a, yeah.
sounds good. Thank you. I will do that. Hope if you can't hear me, just like chat in or yell or whatever. Um, cool. So staffing store, we have a couple of new filters that come into play here. Again, we want to look at it by store to see exactly, what's happening, because every store at your business is going to probably be different depending on where it's located. Store metric selection. So this kind of goes back to the goal setting we've been talking about with our premium modules for a while. Really depends on what goal you want to focus on. So do you want to increase your basket count, or do you want to just increase revenue? We talked about building marketing strategies, focusing on when people are coming into your store and who those people are, what are they buying, all that good stuff. So this is where you can kind of focus on that goal metric, whether it be by revenue or basket count. Let's say, for example, or gross margin. Let's say, for example, I want to increase my basket count and I want to see, when are my average or highest basket times, I guess, when are my basket counts the highest, what hour of the day, and what does that look like in terms of average basket count per employee? Are they kind of overworked? Are they underworked? Do I need to adjust my employee count to kind of account for baskets? So I'm going to choose basket here. And then is bud tender? Yes, no. This goes back to what I showed at the very beginning with that sales staff count. So you can look at it by bud tender, yes. So that would be any sales staff that's marked as yes. That's who we would be focusing on. I'm not sure what a scenario would be if you do want to look at when it equals no, but that is an option as well. Sold day, I'm again looking at the last 3 complete months, and then hour of day, you can adjust this to be shorter or longer, but I'm just going to look at all my hours. Once I have all those selected, I can see that my employee count equals 6. So I have 6 total bud tenders working on any given day. So again, if we look back here, we can see that we have 6 bud tenders selected in this employee list. So that looks good. Average employee count lasts 3 complete weeks. So it looks like I have 6 employees on the floor each day, every single day, which I think, because this is our demo store, obviously our data is not going to be amazing, but that probably isn't the case for most stores, I would say. So maybe we want to take a look at that and potentially adjust it as we go along, because maybe we don't need as many people coming in on Mondays and Tuesdays, because those were our much lower transaction times than, say, a Saturday or a Friday. I do know that this sold day of week column, it sorts the days kind of weird. So I'm not sure why that is, but that's just something to call out. So you have to kind of look at the days and then the count. And then staffing counts for next week from last year. So this is going to give you an idea, like if you are planning your schedule and you want to adjust it, this will be an idea of like, what did last year look like for your store? If your store wasn't open a year ago, then the totals aren't going to be, aren't going to show, but this is going to be, showing you what your, or how your store was staffed last week. And this is the last complete week. So if this is today and we're looking at next week, then next week starts on Monday of next week and goes Monday through Sunday. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions on this initial information in staffing store?
Oh, I'm good right now.
Cool. All right. So now scrolling down here by day, this is showing us a couple of different units or a couple of different metrics here. So we're looking at employee total. Again, it's all the same bar because it's 6 employees every single day, as we saw up here. And then the metric that we selected, that's going to be shown in the dark blue line. So the basket count for each day over the last 3 months. And then we have metric per employee. So the metric per employee is going to be baskets per employee over the day. So 6 employees on this day. We have a count of 199 baskets on March 4th. That divided by 6 is going to give us this metric. So on average, how many baskets is one employee dealing with per day, essentially is what this is breaking it down by. So you can see kind of the ebb and flow of what that looks like every day. Looks like on our holiday for 420, recorded as 421 in our system, it had quite a high metric per employee compared to the rest of the days. So I would imagine that our employees were quite overworked that day or very tired at the end of it. To make this a little easier, you can click the Alt key and then select metric per employee or whatever data point you're trying to look at. And then you can kind of hover over all these little triangles. It can be kind of cumbersome to look at all of those data points together. But if you want to just like draw an average line through this, you can kind of take a guess at what your average metric is on any given day. So it looks like it's about 30 or 28 or whatever. So that's just one other kind of tool tip, just Alt key and then click on the data point that you want to see. Down below here, the metric per employee, this actually is the same information, just instead of having to guesstimate the average, we did it for you. And then we went ahead and showed you, are you above or below the average metric per employee? So the purple is going to represent the above average. So that means that the employees on this day were dealing with a couple of more baskets than they usually would on average. The below average is going to be the opposite. So of course they're dealing with a couple less baskets on average. So what we can kind of take from this information is if they are above average, like maybe chronically they're above average every single weekend on a Saturday, which might be the case because our basket counts and transaction counts are higher on Saturdays. Maybe you could get away with adding an additional 1 or 2 people per store or per that store on Saturdays to make it a little bit more even and maybe less so on the below average days. So maybe, you know, employees are averaging 2 baskets per hour or 2 transactions per hour. That seems like probably that employee could handle that, or maybe a couple more. So maybe having 1 or 2 less employees on that day could be helpful too. And then eventually it could balance out, you know, your revenue or your gross margin or whatever goal you're trying to meet. So that is metric per employee. And then if you want to see this broken out by hour, we have quite a few crazy graphs down here. I'm going to look at this one first, the metric by employee data table. So this one is going to show you, it says that as the numbers become more red, the farther they're deviating from the average. So we can see down here, like on Saturdays, which is a great example because we know that it has more transactions during that day. We can see that on average by hour, the employees have 4 baskets or 4 transactions per hour, 4 baskets per hour. Whereas on a Monday morning at 8 or 9 a.m., they have 1, which is not that much. And we know that 6 people are staffed on Mondays. If each employee is handling 1 transaction per hour, that's probably not necessary. We could probably have less people staffed during that hour. Whereas Saturdays, maybe we need more people on the floor to handle all those transactions and demand. That's one way of looking at this. Another way is looking at these 2 up here, the day of week by hour employee count and day of week by our selected metric employee. So the day of week, this one over here, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So we hover over any one of these, it's going to tell us the total revenue. And this is going to be over the last 3 complete months. So it's not going to be in one single day. It's going to be a kind of an aggregate of all of this data over the last 3 complete months. So on the hour of noon on Wednesdays, our total revenue over the last 3 months equals about $7,000. Over that 3 months, we've had 68 employees working on that hour of Wednesday. And then it will give you the sold hour day and day of week. So this is just kind of to get an aggregate of information. Same with this over here, it's going to tell you the metric by employee over the last 3 months. So the basket count for that hour of day, employees total over the last three months, and then metric by employee. So 3 baskets per on this hour per employee. So it can get a little pretty granular there, but it'll give you a good idea of, you know, what your basket count looks like, or if you're looking at by revenue, what that looks like, and what your employees are currently handling. And you can then assess if it's maybe too much or too little, and if you could readjust your schedule from there. And again, like I said, it's going to be short and sweet today, but that's really all I wanted to go over in terms of scheduling effectively. This is a great place to start to get your benchmarks, to kind of get a grasp on what your data is actually doing, or what your stores are actually doing in terms of staffing. And then if you need to make adjustments, this would be a great place to kind of start writing down your goals there and start adjusting things. So any questions on anything that I just went over?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, great. Well, I know that this is probably not as nearly as exciting as the marketing content, but it is important nonetheless. So thank you so much. I'm happy to stay on the line to Kurt if you have any additional questions or anything else you want to talk about, that's cool too. But thank you so much for joining, and hopefully you come to Thursday's session that will dive deep into the rest of the employee management module.